They sent this Bobcat Kitten flying to his death end. Then a cop did the unthinkable. Should have ended in tragedy. But that tiny heartbeat in the dirt set off a storm no one saw coming. 'Cause saving the helpless meant standing against the powerful. And when the truth clawed its way to the surface, it wasn't just about an animal anymore. It was about betrayal, danger, and a fight that could cost everything. What secret was worth killing for? And how far would one man go? When the law itself turned against him? Before we begin, let me know where you're watching from. It turns this little corner of the internet into something bigger, something shared. Deputy Cal Whitaker's fingers trembled as he scrolled through his phone. Watching the viral video for the third time, the shaky footage showed a small, struggling form being tossed from the highway overpass like it was nothing more than trash. His stomach churned at the casual cruelty of it all. The video had already racked up thousands of views. With comments demanding justice flooding in by the minute, the clock on his dashboard read 2:15 in the afternoon when he pulled his patrol car onto the shoulder of Highway 37. The mile marker matched the one mentioned in the video, number 42. Cal stepped out into the crisp autumn air, his boots crunching on gravel as he approached the guardrail. Looking down the steep embankment, he spotted fresh skid marks. In the dirt and scattered beer cans glinting in the afternoon sun, his training kicked in as he documented everything with his phone camera, carefully making his way down the ravine. The descent was treacherous, loose rocks sliding under his feet. A weak mewling sound stopped him in his tracks. "Hello?" he called, out softly, scanning the underbrush. "Where are you, little one?" The sound came again, barely audible over the rush of distant traffic above. Cal pushed through thick brambles, ignoring the thorns catching on his uniform. Then he saw it, a tiny bobcat kitten, no bigger than a house cat tangled in some undergrowth. Its fur was matted with blood, its breathing labored and wheezy. "Oh God," Cal whispered, dropping to his knees beside the injured creature. He could see why it hadn't been able to escape. Just beyond where it lay were several wicked-looking steel jaw traps, their metal teeth gleaming dully in the filtered sunlight. His jaw clenched as he noticed the stamps on each trap, BL. Working carefully, Cal documented everything with his phone. He photographed the traps from multiple angles, making sure the manufacturer's marks were clearly visible. When he noticed a small tooth lying in the dirt, likely knocked loose during the fall, he carefully collected it in an evidence bag. With shaking hands, he pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, this is Deputy Whitaker. I'm at mile marker 42 on Highway 37. I've located the animal from the video report, alive but injured. Also found illegal traps at the scene. Requesting animal control backup." "Copy that, Deputy. Stand by." 10 minutes later, Cal's radio crackled again. "Deputy Whitaker, Sheriff Whitaker, requests your immediate return to the station. He'll handle the situation personally." Cal's heart sank. He knew that tone. It was the same one his father used whenever he was about to shut something down. Still, he had no choice but to comply. Back at the station, Sheriff Hollis Whitaker stood behind his desk, his face etched in stern lines. The afternoon sun streaming through the Venetian blinds cast bars of shadow across his features. "Son," he said, his voice gravelly, "I've seen the evidence you collected. This situation needs to be handled delicately." Cal stood at attention, his father's authority pressing down on him like a physical weight. "Sir, those traps are illegal, and the video clearly shows what it shows." Hollis cut him off. "Is something that could cause unnecessary hysteria in our community. We don't need animal rights activists descending on our town, making trouble." "Dad, that's sheriff when we're on duty." Hollis's eyes hardened. "You're going to mark that animal as euthanized and close this case." "That's an order, Deputy." Kel felt something inside him crack. He thought of the tiny creature fighting for its life down in that ravine. "Yes, sir," he said, wooden-eyed at his desk. Cal's fingers hovered over his keyboard. With each keystroke logging the false report, he felt like he was betraying everything his badge was supposed to stand for. But he had a plan forming. "Going to verify the disposal site," he told the desk sergeant as he headed out, his voice carefully neutral. The lie felt bitter on his tongue. The sun was lower in the sky when Cal returned to the ravine. The kitten was right where he'd left it, its breathing even more labored now. Moving quickly, he wrapped it gently in his duty jacket, cradling it. Against his chest, the rumble of trucks on the highway above seemed to grow louder, like the world was holding its breath. Cal stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of his decision. The line between right and wrong had never felt clearer. His father's orders on one side, everything he believed in on the other. The kitten stirred weakly in his arms. And Cal knew there was no real choice at all. Sometimes doing the right thing meant standing up to the people you loved most. He carefully picked his way back up the ravine. The precious bundle held close to his heart. This wasn't just about saving one small life anymore. It was about what kind of man, what kind of law enforcement officer he wanted to be. With each step, Cal felt the moral line beneath his feet growing more solid, like bedrock. He couldn't change what his father had become, but he could choose a different path for himself. The kitten's warmth against his chest felt like a reminder of why he'd become a deputy in the first place, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Even if it meant going against his own father. Cal knew this was a stand he had to take. Cal's hands shook slightly as he filled out the incident report. Each checkbox felt like a betrayal of his oath, especially when he marked "Animal destroyed, remains disposed of" in bold black ink. The injured Bobcat Kitten lay wrapped in his jacket on the passenger seat, making tiny sounds of pain that twisted his heart. He knew exactly where to go. Tess Landry's Wildlife Rehabilitation Center sat at the end of a dusty road just outside town limits, a modest collection of buildings surrounded by large outdoor enclosures. He'd heard plenty about her, from his father and other deputies, usually with words like troublemaker and tree hugger attached, but he also knew she was the only one who might help without asking too many questions. The sun was setting when Cal pulled up to the metal gate marked Wildlife Recovery Center. A tall woman in worn jeans and a faded work shirt emerged from the main building, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical braid. Her expression hardened when she saw his uniform. "Deputy," she said flatly, "what brings you to my door?" "Please," Cal said, carefully lifting his jacket-trapped bundle. "I need your help." The kitten's weak cry changed everything. Tess's face softened as she rushed forward, taking the small creature with gentle, practiced hands. Inside. Now. Examination room was clean, but cluttered with medical supplies. Tess worked quickly, checking vital signs and cleaning wounds while Cal hovered nearby, explaining everything: the video, the ravine, the traps marked BL. Barrett Lockwood. Tess spat the name like poison. "I've been tracking his handiwork for years. Those traps are illegal. Cruel steel jaws that snap shut on anything unlucky enough to step in them. But money talks in this county, doesn't it?" She looked up from bandaging a nasty cut on the kitten's leg. "Why did you bring it here instead of following procedure?" "Because the procedure would have killed it," Cal said quietly. "The sheriff, he ordered me to mark it as destroyed, to protect Lockwood's interests. And instead you falsified a report and brought it to the biggest thorn in Lockwood's side." Tess's eyes locked with his, searching. "You know what you're risking?" Cal could answer. His radio crackled. "Unit 3, this is dispatch. Lockwood Estate Foreman requesting immediate callback regarding wildlife incident." Cal's throat went dry. "Copy that. Dispatch. I'll handle it." Tess was already moving, scooping up the drowsy kitten and heading for a hidden room behind a storage cabinet. "They'll want proof of disposal, a receipt from the incinerator." "I know." Cal ran a hand through his hair. "Dad will expect it on his desk first thing tomorrow." "Welcome to Barrett Lockwood's kingdom," Tess said grimly, emerging from hiding the kitten. "Where money buys whatever truth he wants to hear. I've got medical supplies stockpiled. Learned that lesson after the last time I tried to expose him. Ba-da-da-da. But we'll need to be careful. Very careful. Very careful." Cal's phone buzzed. A text from his father. "Where's that disposal paperwork?" The reality of what he'd done hit him like a physical blow. His badge, his family name, his whole future in law enforcement, all of it balanced on the life of one small bobcat. He could feel the walls closing in. "I can't protect you," Tess said softly, reading his expression. Lockwood owns half the county board, and your father answers to them. The moment they suspect that Kitten's alive, they'll come. Down hard on both of us. Then we don't let them suspect. Cal straightened his shoulders, decision crystallizing.
Us.
You focus on keeping it alive. I'll handle the paperwork. Create a paper trail so tangled they'll never sort it out. We document everything, the trap locations, the markings, build our
case slowly when Lockwood realizes someone's poking around his operation. By then we'll have enough evidence that even his money can't bury it. Cal met her eyes. I took an oath to protect and serve. That includes the ones who can't speak for themselves. Tess studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Well, Deputy, Whitaker, looks like we've got ourselves a partnership. She extended her hand. The kitten stays hidden. We work the trap chain, figure out how deep this goes. But we move smart. One wrong step, and Lockwood will crush us both. Cal shook her hand, feeling the strength in her grip, agreed. From now on, officially, that kitten is dead and disposed of. Unofficially, he glanced toward the hidden room, where their secret lay recovering. Unofficially, we're just getting started. His radio crackled again with the foreman's increasingly angry demands. Cal switched it off, knowing he'd pay for that later, looking at Tess's determined face. Seeing the same commitment to justice reflected there, he knew he'd made the right choice. They had drawn their line in the sand. Now they just had to be smart enough, careful enough, to see it through. The night pressed heavy and dark against Tess's barn, not even a sliver of moon to pierce the clouds. Inside, she changed the Bobcat Kitten's bandages by lantern light, her movements gentle and practiced. The tiny creature had started showing real improvement over the past few days. Its breathing steadier, its appetite returning. A sudden crunch of gravel outside made her freeze. Multiple vehicle doors slammed in quick succession. Before she could react, the barn door burst inward with a thunderous crash. 3 masked men stormed in, their heavy boots kicking up dust as they swept flashlight beams across the walls. "Find it!" one of them barked. "Search everything." Tess's heart hammered against her ribs. She clutched the carrier containing the kitten close to her chest and backed toward the rear stall. One of the men knocked over her medical supplies table, sending bottles and bandages scattering across the floor. "Where's the evidence, lady?" Another man advanced on her, his face hidden behind a black ski mask. "We know you got something you ain't supposed to have. Get out," Tess shouted, her voice stronger than she felt. "This is private property." The third man swung his arm, knocking her lantern off its hook. The glass shattered as it hit the ground, spilling burning oil across the dry hay. Flames leaped up instantly, spreading with frightening speed along the barn floor. Gunshots cracked through the air. Bullets punched through the wooden siding near Tess's head, making her duck and stumble. She clutched the carrier tighter, her hands shaking as she tried to shield the terrified kitten. The sound of screeching tires cut through the chaos. Lights swept across the barn's interior as a vehicle skidded to a stop outside. Deputy Cal. Whitaker burst through the doorway, his service weapon drawn. He'd had a gut feeling something wasn't right and had doubled back to check on Tess. Thank God he had. "Police. Drop your weapons." Cal's voice boomed with authority. When one of the masked men raised a gun, Cal fired 2 precise shots that splintered the door frame beside the attacker's head. The warning shots had their intended effect. The intruders scrambled back, returning wildfire as they retreated. Smoke was beginning to fill the barn, thick and choking. Cal kicked aside burning hay bales, creating a path through the spreading flames. "Tess, this way." He reached her side, wrapping one arm around her shoulders while she held the carrier. Together, they stumbled toward the exit. The heat was intense. Now, the fire consuming the dry wood and hay with frightening speed. Cal half-carried Tess to his cruiser, helping her into the passenger seat before running around to the driver's side. As he slammed the car into reverse, a thunderous crack split the air. Through the windshield, they watched a burning support beam crash down where they'd been standing moments before. Tess clutched the carrier to her chest. Her face streaked with soot as they sped away. In the rearview mirror, the barn was a pillar of orange flame against the black sky, decades of memories going up in smoke. The kitten mewed softly from its carrier, somehow sensing the gravity of what had just happened. "There's an old storage shed on my back property line," Tess said, her voice rough from smoke. "We can hole up there for now." Kel nodded grimly and turned down the rutted access road that led to the far corner of Tess's land. The shed was little more than 4 walls and a roof, but it would have to do. They parked behind it, out of sight. From the main road, inside the musty space, Cal helped Tess clean the worst of the smoke residue from her face and hands with bottled water from his car's emergency kit. The kitten seemed miraculously unharmed, though clearly shaken. As Tess checked it over, Cal's flashlight beam caught something glinting in the folds of his uniform shirt. Scorched spring mechanism that had fallen from one of the intruders. Trap collection. He carefully pocketed it as evidence. "This changes everything," Tess said quietly. Looking up at Cal, her eyes were hard with determination despite her exhaustion. "They're not just trying to cover their tracks anymore. They tried to kill us." Cal ran a hand through his smoke-scented hair. "No more playing defense," he agreed. "We need to take the fight to them before someone actually gets hurt or worse. Need proof. Real proof that can't be buried or burned." Tess's hand found Cal's in the darkness, squeezing it tight. "Are you ready for what that means?" Cal thought of his badge, his father the sheriff, everything he stood to lose. Then he thought of the masked men shooting at an unarmed woman, of a helpless animal thrown from a bridge, of all the corruption they'd let slide for too long. His jaw set with resolve as he squeezed Tess's hand back. "I'm ready," he said. "Whatever it takes, we end this." Tonight proved they're willing to go to any lengths to keep their secrets. We have to be willing to go just as far to expose the truth. The kitten purred softly from its carrier, as if adding its own voice to their pact. In the distance, emergency vehicle sirens wailed as fire trucks responded to the burning barn. But here in this humble shed, a line had been drawn. No more running. No more hiding. The time had come to fight back. The first rays of sunlight crept through the window of the storage shed where Cal and Tess had taken refuge after the fire. Cal spread out a worn map on a rickety table, carefully marking locations with red pins. His fingers traced the pattern of trap locations, connecting them to shipping manifests and serial numbers he'd photographed. "Look at this," Cal said, pointing to a cluster of marks. "Every single trap bears the same manufacturer's stamp, and they all trace back to bulk purchases made by Lockwood's estate." Tess nodded, her attention split between Cal's investigation and the injured kitten resting in a makeshift bed nearby. She held up her notebook, filled with detailed observations. "The kitten's injuries tell a story too. These aren't random accidents. The pattern of wounds matches exactly what you'd expect from baited traps. And something else that's been bothering me." She flipped through her notes, pointing to specific entries. "This little one was separated from its mother way too early. The dental development, size, even basic motor skills, everything indicates premature separation. It's consistent with what I've seen in other suspicious rescue cases." Cal ran his hand through his hair, frustration evident on his face. "We need help. One with authority beyond the county level." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through. "Contacts. I know someone, Lenora Pike. She's a federal wildlife agent who's tried to crack cases around here before." 3 hours later, they met Lenora at a quiet diner 30 miles out of town. She was a slim woman with sharp features, dressed in a plain but professional suit. Her no-nonsense demeanor was immediately apparent as she pulled out a well-worn notebook. "Show me what you've got," she said, her voice carrying a hint of dry humor. "And make it good. I've hit enough walls in this county to build a house." Cal and Tess laid out their evidence piece by piece. The trap chain documentation, photographs, medical records, and witness statements. Lenora's pen moved steadily across her notebook, her expression growing more focused with each new detail. "This isn't just about one kitten," Lenora said, tapping her pen thoughtfully. "You're describing a sophisticated operation. They bait predators, capture extremely young animals, and then," she paused, connecting the dots, "they're laundering the hides as legal trophies, using charitable donations as cover," Cal added. Lockwood's Wildlife Foundation makes headlines every year for their conservation efforts. Together, they spent hours crafting an affidavit, building a careful case that outlined the entire scheme. Lenora's expertise helped shape their scattered evidence into a coherent legal document that detailed everything: the baiting operations, the systematic capture of young animals, the trophy laundering, and the financial manipulation through philanthropic donations. The next morning, Cal and Lenora presented their case to the county prosecutor. The man sat behind his massive desk, his expression growing more uncomfortable with each page he read. Cal noticed the framed photo on the wall, the prosecutor accepting an oversized check from Barrett. Lockwood at a charity golf tournament? Can't sign this, the prosecutor said finally, pushing the affidavit away. The evidence is circumstantial at best. We'd never get a conviction. Lenora's face didn't change, but her eyes said everything she'd seen this dance before. The paper shield of local influence held firm, protecting Lockwood's interests just as it had countless times before. Back at the storage shed, Cal delivered the news to Tess. She was checking the kitten's wounds, her hands gentle, but her jaw set in determination. "They won't sign," he said simply. Tess didn't look surprised. Of course not. Lockwood's tentacles reach everywhere in this county. She finished changing the bandage, her movements precise despite her anger. "Yes. But this isn't just about one injured kitten anymore, is it?" Cal shook his head, leaning against the wall. "No. This is their business model. They're doing this systematically, creating tragic rescues while running a hidden trophy operation, and using charity donations to make it all look legitimate." "So, what do we do now?" Tess asked, gently stroking the sleeping kitten. "We keep digging," Cal said quietly, "but we do it smart. We do it quiet. There's more to find, and sooner or later we'll find something they can't bury." Tess nodded, her expression determined. "Then, that's what we'll do. One piece of evidence at a time, until we have enough to bring this whole thing down." The kitten stirred in its sleep, a tiny paw twitching. Both Cal and Tess looked at it, reminded of why they'd started this fight in the first place. The setback hurt, but it had also revealed the true scope of what they were dealing with. This wasn't just about saving one life anymore. It was about exposing a system built on cruelty and greed. The retaliation came swiftly and without mercy. Cal sat in Sheriff Hollis Whitaker's office, the morning sun casting long shadows across the worn carpet. His father's face was granite hard as he held out his hand, badge and gun. Now, Cal's throat tightened. On what grounds? Evidence mismanagement? Sheriff Hollis's voice was cold, professional. Multiple violations of chain of custody protocols. Failure to properly document disposal of animal remains. With stiff fingers, Cal unpinned his badge and unholstered his weapon, Jida made. A heavy sound as they hit his father's desk. The shield caught the sunlight, flashing briefly before Hollis swept both items into a drawer. 30-day suspension, pending review. The sheriff wouldn't meet his son's eyes. "Clear out your locker." Crosstown Tess was dealing with her own form of retribution. Stern-faced game warden handed her a citation, his demeanor making it clear he was just following orders. Illegal possession of a protected species, he recited mechanically. First offense carries a fine of $5,000. Tess's hands shook as she accepted the paper. "This is bogus, and you know it." The warden's expression flickered with something like sympathy before hardening again. "Take it up with the court." The anonymous calls started that evening. Cal's phone buzzed constantly with blocked numbers. Each message was more taunting than the last. "How many dead kittens does it take to end a career?" one sneering voice asked. "Hope you enjoyed playing cop," another mocked. "Your career funeral's going to be real quiet." Tess wasn't spared either. The messages came at all hours, each one designed to wear them down, to make them question their resolve. But it was Lenora who discovered the truth that changed everything. She arrived at the storage shed one rainy afternoon, her usually composed face tight with anger. She pulled out her tablet, fingers flying across the screen. "Look at this," she said, pulling up. A map dotted with location markers. "I've been tracking state research collar pings in the area. That kitten's mother? She was part of a tagged study group." Cal leaned forward, studying the blinking dots. "What are you saying?" That viral video? The one showing the kitten being thrown from the overpass? Lenore's voice was sharp with certainty. It was staged. Professional lighting, perfect camera angles. It was all orchestrated by Lockwood's media team. Tess's face paled. Why would they do that? To cover their tracks, Lenora explained. By blaming it on thrill-seeking teens, they could dispose of a collared litter that would have brought federal oversight. Once that mother's collar showed up in their territory, they had to act fast. Cal's mind raced, pieces falling into place. But that means he stopped, his stomach lurching as the full implications hit him. That means my father knew. He knew about the collar program when he ordered the euthanasia. Lenora nodded grimly. He was protecting the file from going federal, keeping it local where Lockwood has control. Cal stood abruptly, pacing the small space. His whole world tilted on its axis as he processed the betrayal. His father, the man who had taught him about justice, about protecting the innocent, was actively helping cover up systematic animal cruelty to protect the powerful. All those times he talked about upholding the law, Cal said, his voice hollow, he was really just upholding power. Tess watched him with sympathy, but remained focused on their next move. So what do we do with this? Cal stopped pacing, his jaw set with determination. We exposed the staging, all of it, the fake video, the collar program, the cover-up, everything. They'll fight back harder than ever, Tess warned. Let them. Cal replied, his voice steady despite the pain of his father's betrayal. We've got something they can't smother anymore. Proof. Real proof. Lenora spread her files across a small table. I can help with the technical evidence, collar data, video analysis, timeline reconstruction, but you two will need to connect the local dots. They worked late into the night, mapping out their strategy. The kitten slept peacefully in its carrier. Unaware, it had become the key to exposing a conspiracy that reached from the highest offices in the county down to the dirt roads where Cal had first found it. The betrayal of his father had clarified everything for Cal. This wasn't just about right and wrong anymore. It was about the very nature of justice itself. Would power continue to protect power? Or would the truth finally break through? As they organized their evidence, Cal glanced at Tess. She met his gaze with the same determination he felt. They didn't need to speak their agreement aloud. They would see this through, no matter the cost. The staged video that had started it all would become the very thing to bring the whole operation down. Cal's suspension turned out to be an unexpected blessing in disguise. As he left the sheriff's office that day, a plan was already forming in his mind. Within hours, he'd submitted his application to Lockwood's estate for their temporary security position during the upcoming charity hunt event. It's perfect timing, Cal explained to Tess as they huddled in the storage shed that had become their makeshift headquarters. They're short-staffed for the hunt, and my law enforcement background makes me an ideal candidate. Tess looked up from where she was carefully feeding the tiny Bobcat Kitten with a dropper. The little creature had been fighting a persistent fever, refusing food more often than not. Just be careful, she said, her voice tight with worry. These people aren't playing games anymore. It's exactly why we need to be smart about this. Cal pulled out a small device from his pocket, a body cam barely larger than a button. I'll wear this under my uniform shirt. Everything I see will have recorded. In the corner, Lenora Pike sat cross-legged on a storage crate, her laptop balanced on her knees. The federal wildlife agent's fingers flew across the keyboard as she worked. I've got something interesting here, she announced. That research. Caller from the mother cat? Still pinging, but the signal's bouncing around in a way that suggests interference. Tess carefully set down the feeding dropper and moved to look over Lenora's shoulder. The kitten mewled weakly, and she immediately returned to its side. Sorry, little one, she murmured. I know you're not feeling well. I've been tracking every detail of the kitten's condition, Tess continued, gesturing to a thick notebook. Filled with careful observations, temperature, food intake, medication times, everything. The fever's been stubborn, and these hunger strikes, she shook her head. But we're making progress. We're making progress. Lenora nodded approvingly. That documentation will be crucial. Between the caller interference In the interstate aspects of the research program they've disrupted, we've got our federal hook. Now we just need the evidence to make it stick. Cal pulled out a micro-tracker, small enough to fit in his palm. I'll plant this as soon as I'm inside. That way, you'll know exactly where I am at all times. The warrant packet is ready to go, Lenora added, patting her briefcase. The moment you confirm the presence of illegal traps or penned wildlife, I can move in. But the evidence has to be rock solid. We won't get a second chance at this. Tess stood up, moving to a duffel bag in the corner. I've got my go bag ready, she said, unzipping it to show medical supplies, documentation forms, and emergency equipment. And I've already spoken to Dr. Martinez. She's on standby for chain of custody documentation if we manage to rescue any animals. The three of them gathered around a rough map of the Lockwood estate that Cal had drawn from memory. They spent the next hour going over every detail of their plan, marking potential entry and exit points, identifying likely locations for illegal activities. The charity hunt gives us perfect cover, Cal explained, pointing to various locations. There will be a lot of movement, a lot of distraction. Security will be focused on the perimeter and the main events. That should give me some freedom to move around the more restricted areas. Tess returned to the kitten, who had finally started to show interest in food again. This little one is our proof of what they're doing, she said softly. Every mark on its body, every wound, it tells the story of their operation. We just need to show how it connects to everything else. Lenora closed her laptop with a decisive click. Remember, the moment you spot those baited traps or penned wildlife, give the signal. I'll be nearby with the warrant, ready to move. You'll need to be absolutely certain about what you're seeing. Document everything through that body cam. Cal nodded, feeling the weight of their plan settling on his shoulders. His suspension badge might have been gone, but in its place was something more important, a chance to expose the truth and protect. The innocent creatures being exploited by Lockwood's operation. The kitten mewled again, stronger this time, and Tess smiled. Look who's feeling a bit better, she said, gently stroking its head. You just keep fighting, little one. We're going to make sure what happened to you and your mother doesn't happen to anyone else. As twilight approached, their preparations continued. Cal memorized the layout of his body cam controls, ensuring he could operate it smoothly without drawing attention. Tess updated her medical logs with the kitten's latest readings, noting with relief that its temperature had finally started to normalize. Lenora fine-tuned the tracking system that would monitor both Cal's movements and any signals from the mother cat's collar. Their plan was set. In less than 24 hours, Cal would walk through Lockwood's gates as a newly hired security guard, carrying with him the hopes and careful preparations of their small but determined team. The charity hunt would provide their cover, but justice would be their true quarry. The autumn morning dawned crisp and clear over Lockwood Estate as expensive. Vehicles wound their way up the maple line driveway. Cal adjusted his security uniform, feeling the hidden body cam press against his chest beneath the dark fabric. He watched as wealthy donors emerged from their luxury cars, their hunting attire looking suspiciously pristine and unused. Inside the Grand Lodge, crystal decanters of bourbon caught the morning light as servers circulated with silver trays. The air was thick with cigar smoke and forced laughter. Barrett Lockwood himself stood near the stone fireplace, holding court with a glass of bourbon in his manicured hand. Ladies and gentlemen, Lockwood announced, his voice carrying across the room, I'm delighted to welcome you to our annual charity hunt. Your generous donations make our wildlife conservation efforts possible. Cal maintained his position by the door, carefully scanning the room while his body cam recorded everything. He noticed Mike Henderson, one of the handlers, slip out through a side door with a handheld radio. Following protocol, Cal circled the building's perimeter, staying within sight of the main group while keeping Henderson in his peripheral vision. 20 minutes later, Henderson's voice crackled over the security channel. We've got a situation with a distressed animal in Sector 4. Perfect timing for our guests to witness a rescue operation. Cal's jaw tightened as he watched the handlers spring into action, their movements too practiced to be spontaneous. Followed at a discreet distance as they led the excited donors toward a pre-selected area. His body cam captured everything, the handlers resetting baited traps before the group arrived. The strategic placement of attractants, the calculated staging of the scene, a juvenile wildcat clearly drugged and deliberately placed, lay tangled in brush near one of the reset traps. Cal's stomach churned as he recognized the familiar pattern, the same method that had been used with the kitten he and Tess were protecting. "Oh, the poor thing," exclaimed a donor's wife, clutching her pearls. "How fortunate we're here to help." The handlers made a show of their rescue, posing with the sedated animal, while photographers captured the moment. Elle's body cam recorded it all, including one handler's whispered conversation just within range. "Make sure there's an accident with the mother later," the handler murmured to his colleague. "Lockwood wants some drama for tomorrow's hunt." Cal felt his pulse quicken as he carefully planted the micro-tracker on a nearby transport crate, making the movement look like a routine security check. He pulled out his phone, using the cover of checking messages to send time-stamped clips to Lenora, in the storage shed at the edge of Tess's property. She monitored the incoming footage on her laptop, the rescue carrier ready beside her. Phone buzzed with updates from Lenora, each one increasing their cautious optimism. "Federal review is moving at an accelerated pace," Lenora's text read. "The evidence package is practically undeniable. Keep it coming." Cal continued his rounds, maintaining his cover while documenting everything. He watched as the juvenile wildcat was paraded past more donors for photos, its eyes glazed and movement unnatural. His body cam captured every detail: the irregular stamps on the traps, the handler's callous handling of the animals, the orchestrated nature of each rescue. For the first time since this operation began, Cal felt a flutter of hope in his chest. The evidence was mounting, clear and irrefutable. The law might actually hold this time. Lockwood's money couldn't erase video evidence, couldn't explain away time-stamped footage of their staged rescues and deliberate cruelty. As the donors returned to the lodge for more bourbon and self-congratulation, Cal made one final sweep of the area. He spotted another stamped trap partially hidden beneath some leaves. Looking around to ensure he wasn't observed, he quickly pocketed it. One more piece of physical evidence couldn't hurt. He checked his watch, aware that soon someone would start tallying security rounds and routes. He needed to exit before his movements drew attention. The weight of the trap in his pocket and the body cam footage gave him a sense of grim satisfaction. They had what they needed: clear evidence of Lockwood's operation, recorded and transmitted. In real dash time, back in the shed, Tess watched the footage with growing anger and determination. Every frame confirmed what they had suspected, proved what they had been fighting against. The carrier beside her stood ready, prepared for whatever came next. Cal made his way toward the staff parking area, maintaining a casual pace despite his urge to run. The morning's evidence weighed heavily in his pocket and on his conscience. But for the first time, it felt like weight that might actually tip the scales of justice in their favor. The first sign that everything had gone wrong was the sudden, oppressive darkness that swallowed the Lockwood estate. One moment, security floodlights bathed the grounds in harsh white light. The next, total blackness descended like a heavy curtain. The abrupt silence of dead radios followed immediately after, leaving Cal standing in a void of communication. Through the darkness, Cal caught fragments of urgent whispers. His blood ran cold as he overheard Sheriff Hollis Whitaker's voice carrying across the yard. "Mole in security. Lockwood wants it handled." The words confirmed his worst fears. His own father had betrayed him to Barrett Lockwood. The sound of metal gates clanging open cut through the night, followed by the savage barking of dogs being unleashed. Flashlight beams began to dance across the canyon walls, searching methodically. Cal's training kicked in as he assessed the situation. They were hunting him now, and they weren't planning to take him alive. A shadow moved near him, and Cal nearly drew his weapon before recognizing Tess's familiar outline. She had somehow managed to slip onto the property during the chaos of the blackout, carrying the precious animal carrier. Her presence both relieved and terrified him. She was here to help, but now she was in danger too. "We need to move, Cal," whispered urgently, taking the carrier from her. "They're coming with dogs, and they know these grounds better than we do. They began moving as quickly as they dared along a service path that wound through the canyon. Cal's security clearance had given him access to maps of the property, but he knew Lockwood's men would be expecting them to use these routes. Still, in the absolute darkness, they had no choice but to stick to the paths they knew. The sound of pursuit grew closer, boots crunching on gravel, dogs baying as they picked up the scent. Flashlight beams swept ever nearer, and Cal could hear orders being barked into backup radios that, unlike his dead unit, were still functioning. "Watch your step," Cal warned Tess in a harsh whisper. They'll have laid his warning came too late. Sudden searing pain exploded in Cal's lower leg as a hidden steel cable snare caught him mid-stride. The force of his momentum combined with the snare's spring-loaded mechanism produced a wet, sickening crack as his tibia snapped. Cal bit back a scream, tasting blood where he'd bitten his cheek. The carrier nearly slipped from his grasp as he stumbled, but Tess caught it before it could hit the ground. A gunshot cracked through the darkness, and Cal felt the wind of the bullet as it ricocheted off rock mere inches from where Tess held the carrier. Shh. She let out a startled shout before clapping a hand over her mouth. The darkness that had been their enemy now became their only ally as it swallowed their bearings completely. Cal couldn't tell which direction led to safety anymore. Every shadow looked like a potential escape route or a deadly trap. The pain in his leg was excruciating, each heartbeat sending fresh waves of agony through the broken bone. As he lay there, fighting to control his breathing, the truth hit Cal with the shocking clarity of ice water. His father, Sheriff Hollis Whitaker, was going to let this happen. The man who had raised him, taught him to protect and serve, was willing to sacrifice his own son as a cautionary tale to anyone else who might dare to challenge Barrett Lockwood's power. Tess dropped to her knees beside him, her hands trembling. As she pulled a multi-tool from her pocket, "Hold still," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the approaching dogs. "I'll get you free." Cal focused on his breathing, forcing himself to take slow, measured breaths instead of the rapid, shallow pants his body wanted to make. He'd had emergency medical training. He knew he needed to stay calm, keep his heart rate steady, avoid going into shock. The sound of Tess working at the snare mechanism filled his ears as he concentrated on each inhale and exhale. Their strategy, their careful plans, their gathered evidence, none of it mattered anymore. This had become purely about survival. They needed to make it through the next hour alive before they could think about anything else. Cal could hear Tess muttering under her breath as she worked, her usually steady hands shaking with urgency. As she tried to dismantle the snare in near total darkness, the sounds of pursuit were growing closer. Multiple beams of light swept the canyon walls around them, and the baying of the dogs echoed off the rocks. Cal knew they had minutes at most before they were discovered. His broken leg throbbed in time with his heartbeat as he waited, helpless. While Tess worked to free him from the steel trap, in the inky darkness behind a thick patch of scrub brush, Cal's mind raced through their dwindling options. His broken leg throbbed mercilessly, but a desperate plan was taking shape. If the corrupt system was thoroughly wired to protect Lockwood, then they needed to go above it, way above it. His fingers found the body cam hidden under his security uniform shirt, and he began carefully manipulating its wiring.
Right.
"What are you doing?" Tess whispered, steadying the carrier containing their rescued kitten. Her face was barely visible in the darkness, etched with worry. "Remember that backup uplink Lenora flagged a few weeks ago?" Cal's voice was low and urgent as he worked. "She said the regional news desk keeps an emergency channel open 24/7. If I can rewire this body cam to stream directly to them." His fingers trembled slightly as he made the final connection. Tess's eyes widened with understanding. "Live footage. They won't be able to bury it or edit it." "Exactly." Cal finished the modification and carefully tested the connection. A tiny green light blinked to life success. "If we can make it somewhere with enough light, everything we show them will broadcast in real time. No takebacks, no cover-ups." He leaned closer to Tess, explaining in hushed tones exactly what the feed would capture once they found enough illumination. The trapped animals, the staged hunts, the illegal operations that had been hidden for so long. The kitten mewed softly. From its carrier, as if understanding the gravity of the moment, the The sound of pursuit still echoed through the canyon, but more distant now. They had bought themselves a small window of time. Cal checked the micro-tracker he'd planted earlier on one of the transport crates. Its faint blue blink provided their bearing toward the animal pens, their best chance at documenting the operation. "We need to stay high," Cal whispered, gesturing toward the canyon's rim. "Follow the lip toward the access road. It's longer, but they'll expect us to go low and deep into the canyon." Tess nodded, helping Cal to his feet. The pain in his broken leg nearly made him black out, but he gritted his teeth and forced himself to focus. They began their careful journey along the canyon's edge, using whatever cover they could find. The micro-tracker's steady pulse guided them through the darkness, each blink bringing them closer to their goal, miles away, in her federal office. Lenora sat bolt upright as her computer screen suddenly came alive with an unstable video feed. The image was dark and jerky, but she could make out enough to understand what Cal and Tess were attempting. Her hands flew across her keyboard, documenting the incoming stream while simultaneously mobilizing her team. This was the break they'd been waiting for. Clear evidence of federal wildlife violations happening in real time. "Get me exigent circumstances paperwork now," she barked to her assistant. "I want every available agent ready to move in 10 minutes. She watched the feed intently, silently willing Cal and Tess to stay safe until help could arrive. Back at the estate, the first hints of dawn were beginning to bruise the eastern horizon. Cal and Tess had reached the edge of Lockwood's property, their progress painstakingly slow due to Cal's injury. The growing light revealed their disheveled state, clothes torn, faces scratched from pushing through brush, exhaustion evident in every movement. But determination burned in their eyes. The rumble of engines shattered the pre-dawn quiet. Flashlight beams began sweeping the territory below them as Lockwood's handlers regrouped for a coordinated sweep. They were organizing themselves with military precision, preparing to flush out their quarry. Cal and Tess shared a look, both knowing what came next. The confrontation was inevitable now. Running was no longer an option. But this time they would meet it on their terms, with thousands of potential witnesses watching through Cal's body cam feed. "Ready?" Cal asked softly, checking that the camera was transmitting clearly in the growing light. Tess squared her shoulders, adjusting her grip on the carrier. "Ready. Let's show them everything." The horizon continued to lighten as they prepared to step into view. The kitten stirred in its carrier, perhaps sensing the tension of the moment. Everything they had fought for, everything they had suffered, had led to this point. With the camera rolling and the world potentially watching, they would finally expose the truth that had been hidden for so long. Cal took a deep breath, steadying himself against both the pain in his leg and the weight of what they were about to do. The camera light blinked steadily now, broadcasting every moment to those who needed to see it. There would be no going back, no chance for Lockwood or his allies to spin this story. The truth would go out raw and unfiltered, exactly as it happened. The morning sun cast long shadows across the estate yard as Cal staggered forward, each step sending waves of pain through his injured leg. His body cam captured everything: the rows of baited traps laid out in plain sight, the penned wildcat pacing in distress, and the transport crate marked with his hidden tracker. The feed was live now, broadcasting to countless viewers who could no longer deny the truth. Behind him, Tess moved cautiously, protecting the carrier that held their rescued kitten. The evidence of Lockwood's operation lay exposed in the harsh morning light: cruel steel traps, staging areas for fake rescues, and pens filled with trapped animals awaiting their staged moments of glory. Barrett Lockwood emerged from his estate house, his usual polished appearance now disheveled with rage, his eyes locked onto the carrier in Tess's arms, and his face twisted into an ugly snarl. "That animal was reported destroyed," he shouted, striding forward with purpose. "Hand it over will prove it's already dead. Already dead." As Lockwood reached for the carrier, Tess reacted instantly. She pulled a road flare from her pocket, struck it against the cap, and thrust it forward. The bright red sparks forced Lockwood back, but then something unexpected happened. The sparks found a spilled drum of fuel near the pens, and suddenly a wall of flame roared to life between them and their pursuers. The fire created a moment of chaos. But Cal's attention snapped to movement on his left. Sheriff Hollis, his father, was approaching with his hand on his service weapon. The betrayal Cal had felt earlier crystallized into cold certainty. In one fluid motion, born from years of training, Cal pivoted toward his father. Despite his injured leg, his movements were precise as he caught Hollis's arm and wrenched the sidearm free. "Don't move," Cal commanded, keeping the weapon trained on his father while ensuring the body cam captured every detail. It was a shock on Hollis's face spoke volumes. He had never expected his son to turn the tables so completely. The estate yard erupted with activity as Lenora's federal team breached the perimeter from multiple directions. Agents in tactical gear secured the pens, documenting everything with cameras and scanners. Others moved swiftly to handcuff Lockwood and his foreman, reading them their rights as the wildlife trafficking charges were formally announced. "Barrett. Lockwood, you're under arrest for violations of federal wildlife protection laws." Lenora's voice rang out clear and authoritative, including, but not limited to, illegal trafficking, research interference, and conspiracy to commit wildlife fraud. The look of entitlement on Lockwood's face crumbled as reality set in. His carefully constructed empire of staged rescues and false philanthropy was collapsing in real time, broadcast live for all to see. The foreman, caught trying to destroy documents, was secured while agents collected boxes of evidence from the estate offices. In the days that followed, the full scope of Lockwood's operation came to light. Asset seizure notices appeared on the estate gates as federal authorities began the process of dismantling the corrupt enterprise. The property that had once hosted elaborate fake hunts would be converted into a legitimate wildlife sanctuary. Sheriff Hollis Whitaker's involvement couldn't be ignored. Under mounting pressure and facing charges of obstruction of justice, he submitted his resignation in disgrace. The man who had chosen power over principle found himself on the wrong side of the law. He had sworn to uphold Cal, faced his own reckoning with the truth. In a formal statement, he admitted to falsifying the initial report about the Bobcat Kitten, explaining his choice to protect the animal instead of following an unlawful order. As a whistleblower exposing criminal activity, he was offered protected status and accepted a probationary period rather than prosecution. Standing in the sheriff's office one last time, Cal placed his badge on the desk. This wasn't a forced resignation. It was a choice. He had found a different way to serve justice, one that didn't require compromising his principles. Weeks passed, bringing healing to both Cal's injured leg and the rescued kitten. On a crisp morning, Cal and Tess stood together on a gray ridge overlooking a cedar forest. The carrier between them held their Nero-covered charge, ready for its return to the wild. Tess knelt and opened the carrier door. For a moment, the Bobcat Kitten, now nearly grown, hesitated at the threshold. Then, with silent grace, it bounded forward and disappeared into the cedar trees. Its successful rehabilitation marked not just one rescue, but the beginning of something larger, Tess said. Watching the spot where the bobcat had vanished, "We make a pretty good team?" Cal nodded, feeling the weight of his decision settle comfortably on his shoulders. Together, they had already begun the paperwork to establish a licensed wildlife rescue operation. Their future would be dedicated to protecting animals the right way, not through staged theatrics or hidden cruelty, but through genuine care and rehabilitation. "We'll do it properly," Cal replied, his voice firm with conviction. "No more asking permission from people who abuse their power, just doing what's right." They stood together on that ridge, their shared purpose stronger than any badge or authority. The morning sun painted the cedar forest in shades of hope, illuminating a path forward that neither had imagined when this all began. Their new life would be defined by protection, not permission. A transformation born from choosing truth over tradition and compassion over compliance. If tonight's story sat quietly in your heart, subscribe and send it to someone who might need the same. Comfort.